Guys, a little bit about my story, and many of you guys don't know me. I need a few minutes. I'm from Brazil, and when I was 6 years old, I came to the States, and when I was about 12 years old, I moved back, and I lived there for about 5 years. And in those 5 years, I had my son Alex, at a very early age, and at that time, before I had Alex, I lived with my aunt and my dad, and at that time we lived with about 9 people, 10 people in one house, in a one-bedroom house, and it was very hard because it was very hard for me to adjust because I had just moved back, from the States. And here in the States, I was used to, I need to go somewhere, I just get in the car, and you're there. And in Brazil, it's not like that. Nobody has cars. The people do have cars, but my family, they're very poor, and in Cabrobó, everybody's just very poor. So it was hard for me to adjust, coming from the States and being used to, you need something, you get in the car, you go, and you have what you need. And in Brazil, it's not like that. And also, as a girl, I was 12 years old, and in my aunt's house, we didn't even have a bathroom. So it was very hard. We had to shower outside. We had to use the bathroom outside. So it was very hard on us. And also, in Brazil, people don't make much money. So my aunt, to support all 10 of us, she supported us with her retirement money, which was only about like 300 reais, which is like $150 to support 10 people. So it was very hard on us because she would buy groceries once a month, and once a month she would buy, I'm going to back up a little bit, and once a month she was only able to buy 1 chicken for the whole entire month. So you can imagine, for a family of 10, buying 1 whole chicken. And here we're used to, if you want something, you just go to the store, you buy whatever you want, you don't even think about it. But in Brazil, it was just very hard for us. And I'm sorry. And I remember when we were down there, all we could afford to eat, and this is everybody, this isn't just my family, all we could afford to eat was rice, beans, and, we were lucky if we had money for meat, or if we had money for snacks, or for fruit or vegetables. I mean, nobody has money for that. Nobody has money for fruit, for vegetables, for none of that. And eventually, I met my son's dad, and I didn't have a job. I wasn't going to school, so I lived off of my son's dad, and he worked at a bakery at the time, and he made 300 reais a month, which was only, like I said, about $150, depending on how much the dollar is. And I remember it was very hard because Alex, which my son, and he, I didn't have money for clothes, I didn't have money for toys, we barely had money for food, we barely had money to get by. And in Cabrobó, it's almost like a desert, it's very dry, it's always hot. And I remember, and when it does rain, which it's only like a couple times a year, when it does rain, it rains so much that, it contaminates the water. And I remember at the time Alex was 7 months old, and the water was so contaminated so fast that Alex almost died. I mean, he was just a baby, and like I said, he didn't have fruit, he didn't have vegetables, he didn't have snacks, it was just rice and beans and whatever seasoning we had. And I remember, I woke up and Alex was throwing up like 7 times back to back, nonstop. And I remember I was desperate because here I am, a 15-year-old, I didn't know what to do. So, and I took him to the hospital, but we had no money to buy his medication. So his uncle, luckily, was able to, provide us with the money, and we were able to help Alex. But unfortunately, he was one of the very few that survived, because most people don't have the money, for medication. And I remember too, one of this girl, she wasn't a friend of mine, but she was a girl that I knew in Brazil at that time. And she had a little baby, and I remember that she came to me crying, and she told me that her baby had nothing to eat, and he was 4 months old. And I remember she told me that she had no more breast milk, so she was buying just the packages of powdered milk. And I remember she told me that she would just mix a half a spoonful of powdered milk in the baby's bottle, and that's all she could give him. And when it was over, she said that she had nothing to give him, so she would just give him water. And I couldn't help. I didn't even think about helping. And I remember her mom was crying, crying out in the streets, and I asked her what was going on, and she had taken her baby to the hospital. He was dying in her arms, and her baby died of starvation. And this goes on and on and on, not just with my family and friends, but everybody. And Jeremy and I, which is my husband, we went to Brazil last year. And I remember, when we got there, one of my nieces, she told me that her sister was going hungry, and she has 2 little kids, and she got her tubes tied because she knew that she couldn't afford, to have any more kids. And she was so embarrassed that her sister told us. So Jeremy and I, we went and we asked her if we could help and if we could go to the grocery store, and she told us that she was fine, and that they didn't want to complain because they know that God doesn't like people that complain, and that they should be grateful for what they have, because so many people around the world don't even have what they have. And all they had was rice, and I remember they had some bags of sugar, and they had some seasoning to season their food, and that's it. And I remember I asked her, let's go to the grocery store. We'll buy you something. We'll buy you groceries. And she was so embarrassed and she didn't want to go. So Jeremy and I decided to go. And we asked her to make us a list. And she made a list of 4 little items. And one of the items was a little pad to wash dishes, which is only 12 cents in our money. 12 cents. And she asked if we could buy that for her. And I remember we came back with the groceries, and her little kids went running. With the biggest smile on their faces. And my husband sent his mom an email saying that reminded him of Christmas morning. And I remember the kids, as we were opening the bags, they had the biggest smile on their faces. And here we buy groceries and we say, come on kids, let's go help. And they're like, oh no. And they pout and they complain. And these kids ran outside with the biggest smile on their faces. Like they're getting, a new iPod, And it's just so sad and heartbreaking to see that. And they sat around us and just watched us. And they were so happy just to get groceries. And I remember my niece told me, hey, Johnny, we never buy fruit. You don't have to do that. We never buy vegetables. And I remember I bought her shampoo for her and her kids. She's like, Johnny, you didn't have to buy that. We never buy that. We can just use a bar of soap. And like I said, this goes on, and people still live like that today. And a lot of homes in Brazil are still mud huts. And but sadly, that's not the only problems that, that they go through. I also wanted to talk about, I feel like the kids and the women are so mistreated in Brazil. And I feel like it's more because of the men. You know, there's no leadership whatsoever. The women are mistreated in every way possible you can imagine. Especially where, you know, my family's from, because it's a small town. You know, women, you're supposed to stay home, be quiet, have babies, and they're disrespected, they get beat on, and that's just the way they grow up. And every generation, it's one after another, and it never stops. It's a never-ending cycle. And one of my friends, when I was down there, you know, she was telling me that she came home one day and she was folding her boyfriend's clothes, and she found a DVD in his drawer, and she played it to see what it was, and it was porn. And she told me that he came home and saw that she was watching it, so he beat her up so bad that she ended up going to the hospital, and she stayed there for a couple days. And she told Jeremy and I, she told us that it was her fault. You know, it was her fault that she got beat up, because she shouldn't have been looking at it, because he told her by her looking at it, she was cheating on him because she was seeing other men on the DVD. And in some reason, she felt like it's her fault. And the same girl, you know, before she was dating this other guy, and he would beat her up too. And she ran to her mom one day when she was fed up, and she's like, "Mom, please let me come back home. You know, I can't take this anymore." And this is how women are treated, and this is how they see things, and this is how they believe that they should live. They feel like, you know, they just should shut up and just take it, because this is what they're taught, and this is how the little girls grow up, and this is how the little boys grow up, and this is how each generation, you know, it's a never-ending cycle. And she went to her mom, and her mom told her, "You slept with him, you go back and you take it." And that's what she told her. So, and she could go to any of her friends, any girlfriend, and that's what they will tell her. It's no help. And I remember when I used to live there, you know, you would hear women screaming, getting beaten, and nobody calls the police. Nobody's go help. None of the brothers go help. None of the fathers will help. Nobody will help. They'll just sit and listen. And I remember it didn't change. I mean, last year, Jeremy and I were there, and we were sitting outside at 11 at night, and this lady is screaming, and she's saying that, and her daughter's running back and forth saying that that her boyfriend has a knife in his hands. And nobody says anything. And I remember, and I asked my niece, I was like, "Dada, why doesn't anybody say anything?" And she's like, "For what? Nobody's gonna do anything." So nobody did anything. And luckily, you know, he didn't kill her. And so it's very sad what women go through. And also, it's just sad because nobody has, you know, money for, there's no such thing as Dish, Comcast. You know, you just get the local channels if you're lucky. And all the local channels is just trash. I mean, you might as well be watching porn, because every TV show, I mean, you might as well, everybody's naked, basically. You know, and there's little kids watching this the whole day long. So you have little 8-year-olds, little boys already seeing women as sex objects. You know, and it's so sad because it goes from generation to generation. You know, and I thank God I was able to take my son out of there before he ended up being like that. And then the little girls grow up and they feel like it's normal, you know, so they grow up thinking, oh, it's a normal thing. And then, you know, and then people might think, well, if they're so poor, if it's like that, then why do they have kids? I mean, look at little 8-year-olds see women as sex objects. I mean, I remember, even you walk around, little boys, like these little boys will look at women like a grown man would, lusting over, you know, an 8-year-old lusting over a grown woman. So, I mean, that's how they're being raised. And you really can't even blame them for being that way, you know, because that's what they're being taught. That's what they see on TV. That's how their parents treat their, you know, their wives or their girlfriends. They don't even get married. And I know this happens here a lot, but women have no help whatsoever. There's nowhere to turn to, nowhere to hide. And even the drinking age. The drinking age in Brazil is 18. But, like in bigger cities, kids probably don't drink, you know, before the age of 18. But where I grew up, I mean, I remember this little boy, his dad would give him money and say, "Son, go get me a beer." And this little 3-year-old that, you know, can barely talk, he goes up to the bar and gets a beer for his dad. You know, I remember I was 12 years old, and I would get into clubs. You know, thank God I'm where I am. But just for you to have an idea how easily it is for kids. I mean, I was a kid. You know, how easily you get sunk into, you know, that kind of type of life. And, I mean, you really can't even, you know, judge them because they have so many kids, or they do this or they do that. You know, it's just a very hard life for them.